So welcome to Module 6, the easiest method to write fully developed Band 9 supporting paragraphs. In this module, we're first going to look at common mistakes, then we'll look at why main body paragraphs are so important, the structure of a good supporting paragraph, and how to write topic sentences, explanations, and examples. When I talk about supporting paragraphs or main body paragraphs, they're the same thing, just to let you know that in case you get confused. Okay, so let's look at the most common mistakes so that you can avoid these. So the first common mistake that we see is people putting multiple main ideas into one main body paragraph. So often students will try and think of as many different ideas as possible to answer the question, or just talk generally about the topic, and they will put as many different ideas into the paragraph as possible. How many ideas you use really depends on the question, but you should never have more than 2 in there in one main body paragraph. Normally you will just have 1. If it asks you for multiple things, you will have 2, but it should never be more than 2 in a main body paragraph. I know that is a little bit confusing because I'm telling you that it depends on the question. In the following modules, we will go into that in detail. It really depends on the type of question. But for now, just remember that you need to limit the number of ideas in your main body paragraphs. Don't put as many different ideas in there as possible, because the key really is to develop your main ideas. So instead of writing as many ideas as possible, you have a limited number of ideas and you fully develop those ideas. By development, I mean that you explain those ideas and you support those ideas with evidence or examples. Other students know to limit their ideas and they know that they need to develop their ideas, but they do so poorly. So they might have one explanation but no examples, or they might have explanations and examples but they're very poor. Just having explanations and examples in your main body paragraphs is not good enough. You need to have good explanations and good examples, and we'll show you how to do that in this course. We also see a lot of students using the structure inside their main body paragraphs: firstly, secondly, thirdly, finally. So they'll say firstly this idea, secondly this next idea, thirdly this next idea, and finally this final idea. And that means that there is very little development of any of these ideas, so try and avoid this structure. And then it doesn't matter if you have great ideas, great explanations, and great examples, but your grammar and your vocabulary is very poor. You need to have accurate and appropriate grammar and vocabulary, because if your grammar and your vocabulary is not clear, then your explanations, your examples, your main ideas will not be clear. Your grammar and vocabulary does not need to be perfect, but it needs to be as clear and as accurate as possible. So why are main body paragraphs so important? Well, they are about 70 to 80% of your essay, so of course they are going to be important. And you need to make your opinion clear throughout the essay. You need to make your position clear throughout the entire essay. Your position or your opinion, what you think about the question, needs to be clear in the introduction, the main body paragraphs, and the conclusion. And your main body paragraphs are 70 or 80% of your entire essay, so it's really important that you do that in order to get one of the higher scores, and we will show you exactly how to do that in this module. You must also fully address all parts of the task in order to get a 7 or above. Fully addressing it means answering the question and then developing those main ideas, going into detail on why you believe those ideas answer the question. And that's where your explanations and your examples come in. And you need to also present a fully developed position with relevant, fully extended, and well-supported ideas. So these 3 bullet points come directly from the official marking criteria. So what we do is we take the marking criteria and then we show you how to satisfy these marking criteria in practice. And that's what we're going to do in this module, and that's what we're going to do in the subsequent modules where we talk about opinion questions, discussion questions, and all the other types of questions. So Band 9 checklist. Your ideas need to be relevant. In other words, your ideas need to address and answer the question. You need to fully address all parts of the task. So for example, if the question is a double question, then you need to answer both of those questions. You need to have a clear position throughout, and our structure helps you do that. You need to fully extend and well support your ideas, and those are the checklist. So you should be able to look at your main body paragraphs and say, yes, my ideas are relevant, yes, my main body covers all parts of the task, I have a clear position in my main body paragraphs, and they are fully extended with explanations and examples. So the structure we use for our main body paragraphs contains 3 key elements. The first is your topic sentence, the second is your explanation sentences, and the third is your example. Every main body paragraph should have at least 1 topic sentence, at least 1 explanation sentence, and at least 1 example. But please note that the exact structure will depend on the exact question, so it will depend on the question type. In this module, we're going to look at the elements, and we're going to show you how to write these elements, and then in the subsequent modules we're going to look at this in more detail. So don't worry about what do I do for an opinion question, what do I do for an advantage and disadvantage, what do I do this and that. Let's just focus on how to write these things first, and then in the following modules we will look at how to structure these paragraphs in more detail depending on the question. I know many of you want to just rush through and do these as quickly as possible. Don't skip this module because there's really important information in it. So here's an example question that we're going to use. In some countries, an increasing number of people are suffering from health problems as a result of eating too much fast food. It is therefore necessary for governments to impose a higher tax on this kind of food. Do you agree? So it's an opinion question. So we've started off with our introduction. So this is our introduction. It is argued that states should charge fast food companies more tax because of the growing amount of men and women with health conditions associated with this type of food. This essay totally agrees with that statement because here's your first main idea: these illnesses cost the health service too much money, and increasing the price of junk food would reduce the demand for it. So why are we starting with the introduction? Because it's really important that we use this introduction to help us write our main body paragraphs. Blue is going to be our first main body paragraph, and red is going to be our second main body paragraph. So think of your introduction as kind of like a mini plan for the rest of your essay, and this is going to ensure that our essay is clear, coherent, cohesive, our position is clear and present throughout and is consistent throughout. Okay, so we've taken this main idea and we put it into our topic sentence. Obesity-related illnesses cost the taxpayer billions of dollars every year. And then what we need to do in light blue is explain that people who eat too much fast food are more likely to suffer from costly diseases associated with being overweight. As a result, they have to go to hospital more regularly for treatment, and this puts a strain on the health service. In red, we have our example. For example, a large proportion of the United Kingdom's National Health Service budget is spent on preventable obesity-related diseases, such as heart disease, hypertension, and diabetes. So if we have a look at the 3 elements here, the topic sentence, what is the purpose of the topic sentence? The purpose of the topic sentence is to tell the reader, this is my main idea, this is what the paragraph is about. So your main idea should clearly answer the question. And then in light blue here, we're explaining how that main idea answers the question. So if you said to someone, obesity-related illnesses cost the taxpayer billions of dollars every year, and someone who didn't know anything about this, they would say, well, why is that? Well, you need to explain that to them. People who eat too much fast food are more likely to suffer from diseases associated with being overweight. So if you eat too much fast food, then you're going to be overweight. Well, what does that matter? How does that affect anything? Well, you need to explain further. As a result, they have to go to hospital more regularly for treatment, and this puts a strain on the health service. So you fully explained how this main idea answers the question. And then we provide evidence to support our main idea here in red in the form of an example. We're going to go into detail now on how to write topic sentences, explanations, and examples. So let's start off with how to write topic sentences. This is an introduction to the main body paragraph. You're introducing your main idea. Always think of the reader. Always be helping the reader. Why do we write anything? We write to clearly communicate with the person reading it. So what does a topic sentence do? It helps the reader. It makes it easier to understand the rest of your paragraphs. So like signposts to drivers, when you're driving along, there are signs telling you where to go, giving you information. What the topic sentence does is it gives you the information. This is my main point. This is the main point of the whole paragraph. And it links to the main ideas in your introduction. So you're going to take the main idea in your introduction and you're going to put it into your topic sentence. You're not going to repeat the exact same words. You're going to use paraphrasing to change the form of the words. But the main ideas should be the same. Not the exact same words, the same ideas. Remember to use paraphrasing. And your topic sentence should clearly answer the question. You should be able to show your topic sentence to someone and they will be able to understand what you are trying to say about the answer to the question. So topic sentences are short, clear statements about what the paragraph is about. So that's exactly what it is. It is a short, clear statement about what the paragraph is about. Directly answers the question. Not much detail. That comes later. And it makes your main ideas clear. And you can't write one unless you have clear ideas already. So the people who normally struggle to write topic sentences don't normally have a problem with topic sentences. They have a problem with ideas. They nearly always do not spend enough time planning and thinking clearly about your idea. If you have a very clear idea in your head, then it is easy to write a topic sentence. If you try and rush through the planning process, you don't really think about the question, you don't understand the question, and you don't plan everything out, then you're going to find it very difficult to write topic sentences. And then what students often do is they say things like, I find topic sentences difficult, or I can't write a topic sentence. No, topic sentences are very easy. What is more difficult is clearly thinking about your main idea. Master that skill first, idea generation, planning, and then that makes your topic sentences much easier to write. So let's have a look at the second main idea here for our question. Okay, so this is the question again. This is our second main idea. Let's have a look at what this student has done with their paraphrasing and with their topic sentence. So they've taken the main idea, increasing the price of junk food would reduce the demand for it, and what they've done here is they've put it into their topic sentence. Another reason why fast food restaurants should pay extra tax is to raise the cost in order to decrease demand. So they've said basically the same thing, but they've just paraphrased it. And you could read this topic sentence and fully understand what this person thinks about the question and what their main idea is. So the next stage we need to move on to is explaining that main idea. A good way to think about explanations is just, so what? Well, explain that to me. Give me your reasoning. One of the biggest differences between writing and speaking is you can't ask the writer any questions. So if you do your task 2 essay and you finish it, the examiner can't call you the next day and say, what did you mean by this? Can you explain it a little bit? So what? Like, tell me more about it. They can't do that. So you need to put everything on the paper. One of the biggest mistakes is not explaining properly. Often students make this mistake because they believe that the examiner knows everything already, or the explanations are so obvious that you don't need to write them down. Don't make that mistake. Don't assume that the examiner knows anything. Keep asking yourself questions like, why is this? How is this? Where? When? What's the result? And that will really help you with your explanations. And another way to think about it is giving your reasoning. Why do you believe that main idea answers the question? Give your reasoning behind it. And a good way to think about this is pretend that you are writing to someone with no knowledge of the subject. Think of someone you know who knows very little about this topic. This could be like a little boy or little girl you know, your son, your daughter, your niece, your nephew, or it could be a very old person you know, your grandmother, your grandfather who doesn't know much about this, or a friend who just doesn't know anything about this topic. You wouldn't just give your topic sentence to that person because they don't have any knowledge of the subject. You would fully explain it to them. Clearly explain what your topic sentence means, how it answers the question, and or what the result is. You don't always have to put the result in, but you might have to put that in. I'm just giving you all the tools that you need in order to fully explain your main idea. And it should be between 2 and 4 sentences. Don't worry too much about the number of sentences. Really focus on the quality of those sentences. But if you write 1 sentence for your explanation, that's probably a little bit too short. If you go over 4, that's probably a little bit too much and you'll run out of time. Normally it's about 2 to 4, but you can write 4 sentences and get a band 9, or write 4 sentences and get a band 5. It's really about the quality of those sentences. And we've mentioned this already in this video, but I want to talk about this again because it's really important. Think about why do we write anything? To clearly communicate with the reader. Writing is simply a way of taking your thoughts, putting them on paper, and putting them into someone else's brain. So you have thoughts in your brain, and you need to put them into someone else's brain. And what you do is you clearly put them on paper. They read those thoughts, and they understand those thoughts. Think about it that way, and you will write very clear, effective explanations. And it is your job, it is your responsibility to clearly explain what your main point means. Often we will talk to students who don't write clear explanations, and they'll say things like, oh, why do I have to do this? Like, I just should be able to show how good my English is. It's like, no, it is your responsibility. It is your job as the writer to clearly explain things to the reader. And if you just focus on that, your writing and your communication skills in general will dramatically improve. Because a lot of people are poor communicators, not because their English is bad or their communication skills are bad or they don't know how to write or they don't know how to speak. It is they don't understand that it is their responsibility to make the other person understand. It is not the other person's responsibility to try and understand you. So here's our explanation. This is our topic sentence. Another reason why fast food restaurants should pay extra tax to raise the cost in order to decrease demand. So I need to explain this. All right. So imagine somebody who knows nothing about fast food restaurants. They don't know anything about how tax would affect demand. They don't understand anything. I need to explain this to them. So any extra tax would be added to the normal price of food. So you have normal prices and you would increase the price. And therefore prices would go up. And therefore fewer people will be able to afford to buy fatty food. Okay, so what? What does this mean? How is this going to affect anything? Therefore, this would reduce the amount of junk food people eat, and the result would be a healthier nation. And you could obviously keep going and explain and provide more and more reasons, and you simply don't have time to do that, and that is not what you are required to do on the test. What you are required to do is to take your main point and show that you can fully explain that main point. So a good test would be, think of that person in your life who knows nothing about fast food restaurants or tax or supply and demand or anything of that. If you showed them this, would they understand what you mean, or would they have follow-up questions? Most people would be able to read this and fully understand it. Some people would need a bit more, and the bit more is our explanation. And we'll be looking at explanations in a second. Here's some useful language. Now, I don't teach, copying things or anything like that. I'm not telling you to copy this. I'm not telling you to memorize this. These are just some ways that you can use to help you explain things. But please don't mechanically, robotically use these in your main body paragraphs. This is just to give you some inspiration, to give you some ideas. But please don't start your paragraphs with that is to say, and then use this is because, and then write therefore. Don't write in a robotic way. You need to have these as options, and that gives you the flexibility to write your own paragraph. But let's have a look at what we have here. So that is to say, or in other words, this is where you take your topic sentence and you explain what it means. So this is often a good way to start your explanation, because you're taking the main ideas and you're explaining what they mean. You don't always have to use these, but if you think that the reader would benefit from you explaining what your main point means, then you can use something like this. If you're providing reasoning or explaining things a bit more, then you can just simply say this is because, or the reason is. And if you're talking about the result of something, you can say as a result or therefore. But again, just to repeat, you're not going to use these robotically. So using examples. Examples help us to support and illustrate our main point. They are often much easier to think of than explaining everything. And you probably do this every day when you're speaking to someone. So especially if you're speaking to your friends, your family, and they don't understand something, or you're having like a debate with your friends, your family, and they don't agree with you, you might use an example to help them understand. And a better way of thinking of examples is not to think of it as I need to think of an example, but think of it as evidence. Provide evidence as to why your main point is true. Before I was a teacher, I was a lawyer, and I couldn't go into court and just say, I think my client is innocent because of my opinion. I needed to give my opinion, explain my opinion, and then provide evidence. So I could say something like, my client is innocent because he was in a different country at the time of the crime. Therefore, he couldn't have committed the crime. Here's evidence, and I would show the plane tickets and maybe CCTV, a recording of him checking into the hotel in a completely different country and at the same time as the crime was committed. That is evidence as to why my main point, my client is innocent, is true. So if you get stuck with examples, or you find it difficult to think of examples, try and think of them as evidence that prove your main point. So here are some examples of examples. Some of them are good and some of them are not so good. So students often use personal stories. They will use real examples. They'll use statistics. They'll use news stories. They'll use surveys. And sometimes they'll use academic studies. Like they'll say, according to Cambridge University, blah, 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 blah. All right, so some of these are good to use and some of them are not so good. So these are risky examples. Personal stories, statistics, surveys, and academic studies. Personal stories, we'll go into more detail in a second on why these are risky. But statistics, surveys, academic studies, these are very risky because they are nearly always made up by the student. They're not real. The student makes them up. And they nearly always don't make sense, or they sound false. So you can use these, but they are risky, all right? And I would only recommend using statistics, surveys, academic studies if you really have no other choice and you cannot think of anything else. But I'm going to show you a really simple technique that you can use to convert personal stories into very solid examples, and you shouldn't really need to use any of these. So better examples are real examples. These are the best examples. These are real examples you know for sure are true and that prove your main point. They provide evidence. These are often very obvious, easy to think of. They're the first thing that you think of, the first example that you can think of when you are thinking about your main point. So if you see a question and you immediately think of a really good example that is true, then feel free to use that. But if after thinking about it, you can't think of a real example, but you can think of a personal example, then you can use the following technique to convert personal examples into really good examples that you can use in your main body paragraphs. So why are personal examples not so good? So if we have a look at this one, this is in response to a question about smoking. For example, I used to smoke 20 cigarettes every day, but the government kept increasing the tax and now I can't afford to smoke. Well, this doesn't prove anything because you as an individual can't afford to smoke, but that doesn't mean that if the government increased the tax, everyone else can't afford that. You might be just very, very careless with money. You might have very little money. You might have massive bills and you might have a very lavish lifestyle outside of smoking, which means that you can't afford to smoke when they increase the tax. You as an individual do not prove the general point, and we need to prove the general point. That's why personal examples are not very useful. So instead, this person has thought of a real example. So for example, when the duty on, this is the tax duty on cigarettes, is raised each year in the UK. So this really happens every year, nearly. The UK government increases the duty, increases the tax on cigarettes. More people quit smoking, and this has a knock-on effect on the number of people dying from lung cancer and other smoking-related diseases. Most people living in the UK know this. This is a real example. It is true, it is related to the question that this person is answering. This is much more effective than the personal example because this is real and it proves the general point. But what if you can't think of a real example? Well, what you can do is you can take examples from your own life experience and you convert them into more general examples. So when you see a question and you're trying to think of an example, ask yourself these questions. Where are you from? And how does that apply, the question apply to where you are from? So in your country, for example, with that question, do they have fast food? And do they have fast food restaurants? Do you have a lot of fat people because they're eating in fast food restaurants? Is that becoming a problem? Do they have tax on fast food restaurants? Are they thinking of introducing that? And if you start to think about your own life, you will normally either generate a real example or you'll think of a personal example. If you can't think of anything from where you are from and you live in a different place, often our students are from somewhere like India or Pakistan or Bangladesh, but they live in the UK or they live in Australia. Can you think of anything related to the question in your current country? If you can't, what about your job? Maybe you're a nurse, maybe you're a doctor, and you see people coming in to your hospital or your practice all the time with diabetes or obesity-related problems. You can immediately think of some really good examples there. Or maybe you're a teacher and you see young children having a problem with fast food. Or it could be something completely unrelated to that, like you are a software developer and you work in a big office and you see lots of your colleagues eating McDonald's every lunchtime and they're getting bigger and bigger every day. Or maybe you can't think of anything from your life, but you have a brother who is a doctor, or you have a friend who is a teacher, or you have a friend who lives in, or a family member who lives in a place that has something directly related to this. So for example, my sister lives in New York City and they have lots of taxes on fast food and sugar and different things like that. So by using your own life experience, you can generate multiple different examples, but you're not going to just think of an example and use it immediately. If it is a very personal example, what you need to do is convert it into a more general one. And this is the conversion method for thinking of examples. Remember, if you can think of a real solid example that is 100% true, then you don't have to use this. This is when you're a little bit stuck and you can think of a personal example, but it's a little bit too personal. So I'll give you some real examples from when I'm working with students. I was working with a student and the question was about traditional shops closing because of competition from online retailers. And she said, oh, I don't know anything about this. I said, okay, have a think about your own personal experience. Do you have any experience in your own life? She said, no, I know nothing about shops or anything like that. Do you have any family members? Oh yes, my sister works in a bookshop. Well, has it had any competition from online retailers? Yes, she lost her job because of competition, because people were buying books from Amazon and nobody bought any books from her. So this shop goes down. Great, we can use that. Now, we can't use this personal example the way it is. Why is that? Because it's too personal. So this bookshop might have closed because of competition from Amazon, but it might be that your sister is just terrible at selling books. It might be the owner was terrible at managing the bookstore. It might be that the landlord increased the rent too much. It could be a million different reasons. This example is too personal. What we can do is we can convert it. So this student was from Romania, but she was actually living in the UK, and her sister was living in the UK as well, working in this bookshop. So where do you live? I live in the UK. Let's convert it to something a little bit more general. So we converted it to, for instance, many bookshops in the UK. So we've taken it from my sister's bookshop to many bookshops in the UK, closed down because of competition from online. So this is the example that the student used, and as you can see, she used her own life experience to convert it to a better, more solid example, and this is evidence as to why her main point is true. Okay, so I'm going to give you another student example. This lady was a nurse and she was living in Ireland, and the question that we were helping her with was, should all children have laptops in school? And this lady was living in Ireland, but she was from a developing country. So she said, oh, I know nothing about this because in my country, people are too poor to have laptops, and, people can barely afford pencils and books for their kids, never mind laptops. I don't know anything about this. I said, okay, don't worry. Let's have a think about it. So her own personal experience was, I can't afford to buy a laptop for my child. All right, so I said, all right, this is fine. This is true, but we can't use this as an example because it's too personal. If the person reading this, the person might not, they don't know anything about you. So it might be that you just spent all your money on something else, and you bought an expensive car and you're actually quite wealthy, but you spent your money on a car and a really expensive holiday. This is too personal. So we need to make this more general. So this person, I said, don't worry about where you're from. Let's take it out of that context. Where do you currently live? She said, I live in Ireland. I live in Dublin in Ireland. I said, okay, your kids go to school in Ireland currently. I want you to think about their school and think about whether they have laptops or not. And let's think of an example by converting this based on our own experience into a more general example. So she converted it to, for example, in Ireland, laptops are very expensive, which would prevent most parents from being able to purchase them for their children. So what I said to her was, what is it like living in Ireland? She said, it's very, very expensive. I said, okay, are laptops expensive? Yes, they are very, very expensive. They're like more than €1,000 for a decent laptop. Okay. Do most parents have €1,000 to spend on laptops? No. Okay. So let's convert this from you personally to generally parents living in Ireland. So we've used the example of parents living in Ireland and laptops being expensive in that country to take our personal example and convert it into a more general one. So as you can see, we've gone from this student looking at this question and going, oh my God, I know nothing about this. I don't know anything about laptops, and this is so strange to me, to using the knowledge he already had and converting that into an example. Here's another one. University education should be free for all young people. So when I worked with another student on this one, they said many of my friends were rich. It isn't fair for these people to get free education. This student was a lawyer, all right? And she said she wasn't from a rich background. She was from just a normal background. And we were talking about examples, and she said, well, I don't agree with this because nearly all of my friends in law school when I was in university, their parents were lawyers and doctors, and it wasn't fair that they got a free education when their parents could afford that. I said, okay, that's fine, but this is a little bit too personal. We need to convert this. So what is your job? So we didn't use where she was from. We didn't use where she currently lives. We used her job. She said, I'm a lawyer. Okay, so let's convert this personal one, using your background, your personal knowledge, into a more general example. For example, many young people doing law degrees are from middle-class backgrounds, and their parents can easily afford the tuition fees. So as you can see, this is much, much stronger than this. So let's have a look at the example that we're going to use here. For example, the UK government introduced a sugar tax on sugary soft drinks in an attempt to fight the obesity epidemic. So if you showed this to most people in the UK, the bit in white, and you asked them to think of an example, most people would come up with this. Why? Because it's true. When this was introduced a couple of years ago, it was very controversial. It was in the news all the time. The prices of like Coke and Pepsi and lemonade and all those things increased, and people still talk about it. Everyone knows about this. So this is an example of just a true example, a real example that can be used to provide evidence. So in this module, we learned why main body supporting paragraphs are so important and what a band 9 paragraph must have. We looked at the structure of a good supporting paragraph and how to write topic sentences, explanations, and examples. In the next module, we're going to look at how to write an effective conclusion. And then after that, in the subsequent modules, we're going to look at the specific different types of questions. I hope you enjoyed that module, and I'll see you in the next one.